So again, I was at Florida State, and one of their senior leaders was just stepping into a new role, and he was giving not a welcome speech because he'd been there for a bit, but kind of an intro into who he is and where he wants to take the organization. And I love the story that he told. I'd never heard it before, I don't think, but it really stuck with me. And I've shared it with a number of people. I've shared it with my kids. So here's the idea. And we talk a lot about on Monday Mindset, this idea of adversity and facing adversity and overcoming adversity and working through adversity. I want to give you kind of a metaphor or a story that may help you in seasons of adversity, right? Because we know that the adversity is coming, right? We don't get to choose when we face adversity. It just hits us. Life has storms, right? We go through stormy seasons, and we don't always get to choose when we have to experience a storm. Storms are going to come, but we get to choose our response to those storms. So I want to take you to Colorado. As we were just talking about, Colorado is the theme of the day. But in Colorado, right, the storms come over the mountains, and there are two different animals in Colorado. There's a lot of different animals, but two that we're going to focus on as it relates to their approach to storms. There are cows and there are buffalo. And so in Colorado, right, the storms come over the Rocky Mountains down into the eastern part of the state where it's much flatter. And cows, they sense the storm coming and they see it and they run away. Like, I'm going to outrun the storm. We've got to get away from it, right? They're trying to avoid the storm. Well, you know how this goes. They're running away. Cows are slow. Instead of running away from the storm, they get stuck in the storm. They end up running with the storm. And so the amount of frustration, the length of the battle, how long they have to deal with the adversity is just maximized, right? They've added to the amount of time that they have to face that situation. They're just, as the storm is picking up strength, the cows are just running with it until eventually that storm passes them. And that's what a lot of us do, right? We see adversity, we see challenges, we see obstacles, we see storms coming. We're like, I don't want to deal with this. I'm not ready for this. I can't handle this. And we run away from it. And when we run away from it, we have to experience more of it. That situation just gets worse. The more you avoid a situation, the more difficult a situation becomes. Now, on the flip side, buffalo, they see the storm coming over the ridges, like, all right, let's go. And they charge into the storm. And because they charge into the storm, they go right through the storm. They still experience it, right? There's still frustration. There's still obstacles. There's still challenge. There's still pain. They still have to fight the battle, but they fight the battle for a shorter amount of time. They experience that pain for a shorter amount of time. They experience the adversity for a shorter amount of time. They run through it, and then they're on the other side of it. They dealt with it in a different way than cows did. Same storms, different response, different experience. Because the buffalo, they're not afraid of the storm. They don't try to avoid it. They know they can't avoid it, right? And this is true of adversity in our lives. We cannot avoid adversity. It will hit. The question is, are we going to run away from adversity, or are we going to run through adversity? Are we going to run into the storm and say, hey, I don't want to face this, but I know I have to. And I can delay, I can avoid, I can try to get around it, or I can say, you know what? It is what it is. It's here, head down, let's go through it. Let's charge into it. Let's take it head on. Let's be bold. Let's be courageous. And let's just get through this battle. Let's get through the storm. Let's get through this season. Otherwise, we get stuck in this season. And the beauty of it is it's up to us, right? We have the benefit that cows and buffalo don't necessarily have. We have reason. We get choices. We have fight or flight. So we can fight the storm or we can fly from the storm. But the storm's going to hit us either way. And so if you are going to experience the storm, if you are going to experience adversity, you get to choose how. Do you want to experience more of it or less of it? Do you want it to overwhelm you, or do you want to overcome it? Our response to that adversity is a choice. We get to choose in the midst of the battle. Do we want to be like the cows, or do we want to be like the buffalo? Do you want to run away from the storm, or do you want to run into the storm? Because life is coming. Adversity is coming. Hardships are coming. Suffering is coming. And I've said this before, I hope you don't hear that as like, that's not a pessimistic, negative. I'm not trying to be like, hey, just prepare. Life's going to be awful. That's not the point. Life isn't awful, but it's full of difficult moments. We've had dozens of them before. We will have dozens more come our way. We cannot avoid it. I think a lot of our frustration in life is that we don't expect life to be hard. We don't expect suffering. We just think life should be easy. I expect to have an easy life. I expect things to go my way. It's not going to. And when you expect your life to be without any suffering or frustration or adversity, anytime you experience adversity, it feels like that much bigger of a situation when usually it's not that big of a deal. But it overwhelms us because we had unrealistic and unhealthy expectations. But when you know, hey, adversity is going to hit at some point, I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know when it's going to be. But I know that when it shows up, I'm going to be ready. And I don't want to experience that adversity for a long amount of time. To the best of my ability, I want to experience that adversity for a short amount of time, which means I don't run away from it and run with it. I run through it. I minimize my time in the storm. I minimize my time in the adversity. I minimize my time dealing with that obstacle so that I can get through it and get back to doing the things that I want to be doing. So that I can get through it and get back to pursuing my purpose. So the quickest way through a storm is into it. Don't run away from it. Don't try to avoid it. Don't try to outrun it, because we can't. Like cows, we're pretty slow, right? We cannot outrun adversity. We're not in jets that can go 500 miles an hour. You can be in a plane, you can outrun a storm. We're not in a plane. Adversity is going to catch up to us. So turn around, see that it's coming, say, I don't know what it is. I don't necessarily want to deal with it. I don't necessarily know the way through it, but I'm going to find a way through it. Because the only path to minimize the adversity is to turn and face it head on and go into the storm. Tracy, any thoughts on that? Kind of short and sweet, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, lots of thoughts. This week when we were on vacation with our friends, Kelly and Jeremy and all of them, we had this exact conversation because we've known each other, all of us, for over 30 years. And we know a lot about adversity. Different ones of us have had to go through different trials and things like that. And so we've been playing what's the game with all the dice where you roll and roll and roll and get fives and ones? I can't remember what it's called. It was really fun, but we had this group of dice on the table and we were saying, like, if we took one of those out and called that our adversity, whatever it is, a rebellious child, a health condition, a divorce, whatever it is, like, that's only one component of our life. And I was saying, like, here's the one hard thing right now in my life. And not to say everybody just has one. Some of us have many, many, or it changes as life goes on. But you take that dice over here and you go, but look at all the amazing parts of my life. I mean, if I focus on this one, it will overwhelm me and it will start to affect all of these. And so I personally try to not ignore or like, that's not really going on. You don't deny what's going on, you go through it, but I'm not going to let that overpower all of these parts of my life that are amazing. And I'm going to focus on these and let this, work on this, but let this go so that it doesn't ruin the rest, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
So
Having a career storm doesn't mean you have a life storm.
that's right.
Having a child storm doesn't mean you have a life storm. Again, that's not to minimize or say those things aren't real or difficult, but we have a tendency, when we have an unhealthy mindset, this storm overwhelms our entire life. Perspective's like, no, that storm actually just impacts here. I'm choosing to let it impact everything else. And you give that storm way too much power and honor than it deserves,
Yeah. And I think sometimes we feel like we have to let that seep into all areas of our life where it's not that important to us. Like, but it can be, a big thing, but not to let it have the power.
And that's how we admire and write books about and listen to people who have dealt with storms. Man, that's incredible. I don't know how they overcame that. They made the choice to overcome it. That was they made the choice in how they handled it. They're not superhuman. They just made the right choice. They chose to not let this thing overwhelm every bit of them. They chose to not run away from it. They chose to not avoid it. They chose to fight it the right way so that they could get through it and overcome it. And we always look at those people like, man, I could never be that person. Like, anybody can be that person. Love it, Dennis. 7 p.m.
This is here from Kenya. Yeah. The other thing is, I will just point out is, there's something about being transparent with your stuff that really helps. this weekend, we all know each other very well. We're very honest about the good and the ugly in our lives, but it adheres you to those people that you go, okay, they're not putting on a facade. They're not acting like all is well, but they're not complainers either. But
Yep.
we can dig in and go deeper in friendship when we do acknowledge the hard.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess I'm
Well,
just
that's true of any, whether it's a speaker, whether it's a friend, like we relate to people who are honest, right? It's like, um, oh, I've got this figured out and this figured out. It's like, okay, you figured out every little thing in your life. I don't know how to relate to that. Well, one, they're lying because
yeah,
nobody's figured out every little thing. Like we talk about mindset all the time. Doesn't mean we've mastered it, right? Like it's an ongoing journey. We have good days and bad days.
absolutely.
Try to make the bad days not multiply. But people are more drawn when we share the struggle. And I experienced this, or this was really difficult. Like that, people relate to your struggle more than your strength.
That's right.
All right, Shelly, what does she got here? Checking with my 2 interns. Yeah, so it's a great point, Shelly. And I think, again, what you look at shapes who you become, right? What you fill your mind with. Because I said something, this is probably a month or so ago on social media, something about like you get to choose your mind. You can choose to be positive. You can choose to be hopeful. You can choose to have belief. And somebody was like, in this climate, like not like actual like climate change, just the climate of the world, right? Everything that's going on. And I said, yes. Are they like in this climate? No, thanks. I was like, that's the problem. You're
Yeah.
choosing to be negative, right? Like you're not making things better. You're actually making things worse for you and for everyone around you because you're choosing to be overwhelmed by those things. I would say, and so don't hear what I'm not saying, right? I'm not saying ignore everything in the world. That's not healthy. Like there are hard things going on. There are difficult things that are happening. We get to choose our response to those things. And I can sit on social media all day long and be angry and anxious and negative and critical. All like, is that doing any good for anyone? It may make you feel good for a moment, right? It's like you feel like this righteous anger or worry, whatever. Well, I should be worried. Should you? Like, is worry making anything better in your life? Is it changing anything? Now you can be aware of things without being consumed by things. And so that's the piece. Like, I'm fully aware of everything going on in the world right now. And someone said, "Well, you're a white man." Whatever. I see what's happening in the world, but I get to choose how I respond to it. I get to choose to like show up with fear and anxiousness and judgment and anger and feel in every other emotion, or I can say, "Man, I see it, but how do I make things better?" Like I see it, but what's in front of me today that I can actually impact, that I can actually move forward, that I can actually make progress on. Otherwise, I could just waste my days being angry. And then you're gonna what will happen? So for your interns, they can wake up in a year doing the same things they've been doing. It's like, did you get better, or did you just get more anxious? Did you just get more worried? Did you just get more angry? Like, look at your habits, right? What are you filling your mind with? That's going to determine what's coming out of you. And so be aware of what's happening in the world, right? Like we need to be aware. You can't turn a blind eye to things. That's not helpful. It's not healthy. And we're going to have emotional responses to some of those things. And that's also not a bad thing, right? Emotions aren't a bad thing. We're human. To try to suppress those, like that's an unhealthy, really unhelpful thing. But your emotions, you don't need to put your anger in, like, hand that the steering wheel. Say, hey, drive me today. You don't need to like hand worry your steering wheel. Say, hey, you drive me around today. It's like, that's not going to lead you to anywhere good. So you get to choose what's in the driver's seat. You get to choose what controls you, and it doesn't have to be your emotions. It can be your values and your standards and your hope, because the only way things get better is to move forward with purpose and with hope and belief. That's the only way things change for the better. Nothing ever got better because we showed up with worry, with fear, with anxiety. Like nothing has ever gotten better because of that. So we have to be really honest. Like if we want to create change around things, then we have to change the way that we show up.
Yeah, and Anthony just brings us back in parenting. If we coddle our kids and keep them from hardship, they'll never be able to face the storms as adults. So instill the mindset at a young age. Yeah, we have to teach our children how to respond. They're going to mimic us, right?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, this is a huge thing. So parents, if whoever is listening to this with parents, the best place you can work on developing a healthy mindset is in your kids. Like one of the best things you can do for the world is to raise mentally tough kids, because life is tough, right? It's going to throw a number of things at them. again, career obstacles, relationships obstacles, financial obstacles, all sorts of things are going to be thrown at your kids. If they aren't able to handle those things, life gets exponentially more difficult. And so put your kids in situations like they have to start to develop mental toughness. They have to start to develop resilience. Like we got to be intentional to work that into our kids, which means speaking the truth to them at times, challenging them at times. Love it. Anthony grew up raising cattle in eastern Colorado, so hopefully that story is true. I remember we had a tornado. This is probably 10 years ago in Oklahoma. We had a lot of them, but we were doing tornado cleanup. And I was out of this trailer park doing cleanup, and the guy said, he goes, I knew something was wrong when we're sitting here and all the cows came running that direction.
Yes.
And they all got stuck. But yeah, it's like raising mentally resilient kids. Like it is such a critical thing for the world. You don't want to raise cold kids. You don't want to raise hard kids. You want to raise mentally resilient kids who love well and show up when things get difficult.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, great conversation. Thank you, Kevin, as always. Will we see you next week?
Yes.
Yes.
We're really big on details here.
Yes, we are.
No, it's 4th of July.
Oh, that's right. Okay. We'll check. Well, yeah, you all have a great holiday if you're here in the US and you're celebrating July 4th around the world. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks,
Amen.
Kevin.
Have a good one. See you guys.
All right. Bye-bye.